Hmm? Ah! Oh.
Mom? Giles?
Oh, well, we're busy.
Mom? Hey! Where did you get that coat? Never mind, listen.
Back off.
Giles, think about this. You want to fight me or you want to let me talk to my mother? Mom, look at me. Do you know who I am?
Of course, you're Buffy. Hey, look, they're giving away candy. You want some candy?
No, I don't, and you don't need any more either.
I'm fine. I can have more if I want.
You are not fine. You need to go home.
Screw you. I want candy.
Mom.
You want to slay stuff, and I'm not allowed to do anything about it. Well, this is what I want to do, so get off my back.
Please.
Oh, for God's sake, let your mum have a sodding candy. Come on,
Mom,
Sarah.
look at your car. Look at that dent the size of New Brunswick. I did that.
Oh, my God. What was I thinking when I bought the kick machine?
Listen to me.
No,
You need...
you listen to me. I'm your watcher, so you do what I tell you. Now, sod off.
Take...
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Still Slaying, a Buffyverse podcast. I'm Penny.
And I'm Kara. This episode, we're going to be discussing Season 3, Episode 6, Band Candy, directed by Michael Lang and written by Jane Espenson and Douglas Petrie. Well, that makes me think of Land Before Time. Anyway, the original air date for this episode was November 10th of 1998.
And let's go back to that date.
Oh, I love it. So the number one song at this time in the United States was Doo-Wop, That Thing by Lauryn Hill, which is still on my driving playlist to this day. And then the number one song in the UK was the iconic Cher song, Believe. Oh,
Yeah, which
this
we
takes
all
me
heard.
back. Oh yeah, to a very specific time. In the US box office, Ants is still killing it at number 1, which is surprising. Number 2, Saving Private Ryan. Number 3, Small Soldiers, also a classic nostalgia movie. And all of these top 3 films are DreamWorks films. So DreamWorks killing it in general at this time. And number 4 is the Adam Sandler classic, The Waterboy. That might be one of the only Adam Sandler movies I can stomach now as an adult. No offense
seen
to
that
Adam
one.
Sandler fans. I love it. It might just be the kid. Like, so my dad is Cajun, his family's Cajun. So I think the Cajun aspect in that one.
Oh, I didn't know there
makes
was a
me
Cajun
happy.
aspect. That's funny.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Going on elsewhere in the news at the time, like around this date, October 30th, 1998, the film American History X was released. This film was a big deal. It was, about neo-Nazis in America, and it was cute. Ed Norton muscled up and tatted up as a neo-Nazi is pretty intense. Also that November, the Furby craze began.
Furby!
Tiger
I got
Electronics.
one for my birthday that year.
Tiger Electronics released its talking hamster-like robot that November, and during the holiday season of 1998, 1.8 million units were sold, as the toy was considered a must-have for Christmas.
That thing was creepy as hell.
They're
at
still
night.
creepy.
I remember shoving it in my closet when I was little. I think I was like I was 10 when I got one, and it
Yeah.
would talk in the middle of the night or giggle, and ultimately I had to take it to my parents' room at night because I was like, nope,
Yeah. Mm-mm. It's
creepy
too
little thing.
much. I'm so glad that those are no longer in. Ugh. On November 9th, in the US, brokerage houses are ordered to pay $1.03 billion to NASDAQ investors to compensate for price fixing. It was at the time the largest civil settlement in US history, maybe still is. Also on the 9th, capital punishment in the United Kingdom, which had already been abolished for murder, is completely abolished for all remaining capital offenses.
I really am curious what the remaining capital offenses were.
I would assume treason,
Damn.
and
Yeah, I
because
guess that would
that
make
gets the
sense.
death penalty in the US too, at least under federal
Yeah.
law.
Yeah.
Probably, treason, terrorism, who
Makes
knows?
sense. I'm
Uh,
after the podcast I might have to go down that rabbit hole.
yeah, take a look.
Yeah.
On November 12th, later that week, Vice President of the United States, Al Gore, symbolically signs the Kyoto Protocol, although the United States never ratified it, so we're not bound by it. The Kyoto Protocol was the operational implementation of the United Nations policies on climate change at the time. November 14th of 98, NBA star Dennis Rodman and model Carmen Electra are married. Do
Oh,
you
wow.
remember how big that was in the news?
Uh-huh. Oh, I
Everybody was
remember.
talking about it.
When did Dennis Rodman wear a wedding dress? Was that related to this at all?
I don't know. I don't
Because
think so. I think that was later.
right, because he obviously just kind of liked to push
Just,
the envelope.
yeah, he liked attention. Like,
Oh, I Googled
so
it.
much.
Apparently, he wore the wedding dress in 1996 to promote his memoirs titled Bad as I Want to Be. That I remember because, of course, in Texas, Dennis Rodman, a man wearing a wedding dress, did not go over well. So that seems to be seared into my brain. But he
Yeah,
looked good.
that
You know.
makes sense. Also, that week, November 15th, The Rock wins his first WWF championship by defeating Mankind at Survivor Series.
Wow.
And, we all know how big The Rock has become in entertainment since then.
It's
And
true.
also that week, on the 16th, the WWF, the corporation, is formed. And this is of note because I used to be a trademark lawyer, and there was a big trademark dispute between the WWF wrestling and the World Wildlife Federation.
Ooh,
And
that's interesting.
wrestling eventually had to change their name to WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, because the Wildlife Foundation won that lawsuit.
That seems fair.
Yeah. And at the time, I was really interested in the case because IP lawyer, trademark lawyer, just seemed
That does
really
sound like
interesting.
an interesting case.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are plenty of listeners being like, we have different definitions of interesting.
Yeah. Although why those people are still listening to us, I don't know.
That's true. Oh, Lord.
I thought we should start by talking about the framing device of the episode of the SATs. At the beginning, we get the fake out of Joyles reading this passage that sounds like it might be some prophecy or something.
I
And
love
then
that.
it turning out to be helping her Buffy study for the SATs. And they have this whole cute scene and the number 2 pencil used to stake a vampire.
Excellent.
Always resourceful, our Buffy. And just a cute scene between the two of them of their relationship and him being particularly paternal in that moment, worrying about her future, et cetera, et cetera. And then the end of the episode, we get another fake out where it sounds like Buffy is talking about what it was like to deal with the events of the episode. She says it was just too much to deal with. It's like nothing made sense anymore. The things I thought I understood were gone. I felt so alone. And then, we get the reveal. Giles says, was that the math or the verbal? And Buffy says, mostly the math.
Yeah.
It's an interesting bookend. I mean, it sets Buffy in this, high school rite of passage that almost every high school senior takes the SATs. And I know now there's different tests. There's like the ACT and like, I don't know what the
Yeah.
system is,
We
but
only had
yeah.
the ACT. Well, I was one of the lucky ones in, gosh, I don't remember what year I actually took them, 2004 or 2005, where they changed the SAT scoring from
Oh,
1600 to out of 2400. So my class had to take both,
oh,
which was not ideal. That and the ACT, I believe, were the only two that were common. You could take, other specialized tests, but those were the ones that were the most common.
yeah.
Good
And
times.
TV shows almost always get the scoring for the SATs wrong. Like whenever somebody mentions someone's score, they have like an odd number at the end. It'll be like, oh, they got a 1257. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not how they score it.
It's like, do a little bit of research, like just a teeny bit.
Like it always ends in a 10.
Yeah. It's like, come on, guys.
But because this episode is about Buffy having to be the grown-up and not being able to rely on grown-ups, it's part of the larger arc of the season, which is just basically Buffy coming of age, right? Like senior year, and at the end there's going to be a graduation, and this is just one of those times. And then they just bring it into stark contrast, Hellmouth style, by having all the grown-ups like stop being grown-ups, and Buffy really does have to step up and be the adult in the room, which is really scary when you're 18 or 17.
Oh, yeah.
She's 17 at this point.
She does a pretty good job of it, too. Like, she takes control. This episode in general, I just love, too, the beginning in the graveyard. Obviously, we have seen Buffy struggle with her priorities as a slayer and her, normal teenage priorities like school. And it's just, I do love the fact that they cleverly put her and Giles doing this SAT prep in the graveyard as she is slaying to showcase that kind of conflict and struggle over which of her priorities need to take precedent, as opposed to them being in the library and going over everything. It's just such a clear representation of that conflict in her life. And they make it funny at the same time.
Yeah, beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
So most of the episode doesn't really move the overall plot forward. This is more of a standalone Monster of the Week kind of episode. There are a couple of things like we could talk about later, like the Xander and Willow storyline moves along a little bit, and Cordy a little bit moves forward, but it's mostly about, I think at this point, it's a joke. It's like a meta reference to the people in the fandom who were like, Joyce and Giles should get together. And what we would now call shipping. And I have, I'm sure not coined this for the first time, but I've been using Joyles as the couple ship name.
It's better than Goyce. That sounds
Goyce would be, or
that sounds too similar to the Yiddish word.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of fun.
Not a nice sound.
No.
So we get a lot of just fantastic sort of teasing the fans about Giles and Joyce getting together, because there is a part of you that wants like mommy and daddy to be a couple, and all kids want that. And Giles is not Buffy's father, obviously, but he is a father figure, and
100%.
all the fans felt that thing where we were like, they could just get together and that would be so tidy and perfect. And getting to see it like this was just, I just felt the whole time like the writers were saying, you wanted it, you got it.
Yeah, here it is.
It was nonstop delightful, but also it completely satisfied the need for me to have those two together.
Right.
Like, it didn't make me say, oh, it's too bad that they didn't carry that over into, adulthood, or when they go back to normal. I was like, oh, we got to see that, and that was fun. And now we can move
And
on.
it's lovely that it's kind of carried through the rest of the series by little references and
Yeah.
in jokes here and there. It makes for excellent comedic content and some really powerful, poignant content going forward. But the end of the episode where Buffy, they're examining the damage to Joyce's car. I love how she thinks it was super geeky. Teenage Joyce was not a fan. And I was like, that's a great car. Anyway, Joyce kind of, they make a comment, and Buffy has this line of, well, I'm just glad that I stopped you two before you did anything, and walks away. And the awkwardness with Joyce and Giles being like, right, indeed. Yes. Okay. Moving on. And
I love how that
like,
moment is shot between the two of them. First, we get like a close up on both their awkward faces, and then we get a 2-shot where they're facing each other, and they both like synchronously like pivot and walk away in this very like, I cannot be in this conversation any longer kind of desperate way. And it is so funny as that last moment of the episode.
They're so nicely executed.
I could quote so many moments as being like super hilarious. The handcuff moment when Buffy's like, never tell me.
That is great.
And the look on Christine Sutherland's face when she like sort of, embarrassedly but also kind of proudly pulls out the handcuffs.
And they're like hanging on her thumb, just kind of like,
yeah.
Wonder where those have been.
Yeah.
Which it's wild too, because one, of course they're committing a crime by breaking and entering to the store and stealing the coat. And then Giles just like casually commits a felony by assaulting a police officer and taking his gun. And then they go over to the cop car immediately on the hood.
Yeah.
Presumably just having their fun while the cop lays unconscious a couple of feet away from them. I cannot get that out of my head every time I see this episode. Because they also needed his keys for the handcuff keys.
I would think so. So they ruffled through his pockets.
Yeah. Giles is pretty strong. He really knocked him out.
Yeah.
Hopefully he didn't kill him.
That was Ripper Giles. What's really missing from this episode is a scene at the end where now adult Giles is like, oh, I shouldn't have jumped over that conveyor belt. Like, I can't do that anymore.
Seriously, because that would have fit in so perfectly when, he and Buffy are running through the warehouse and they kind of get away and come to a stopping point, and he is out of breath.
Oh, yeah. And she's like, that's what
Buffy's
smoking will do.
Yeah. It's like, that's what smoking will do to you. It's just like, yep, Giles.
She does not have any patience or compassion for what Joyce and Giles are going through in that moment. She is so frustrated by them.
Bit.
And, earlier in the episode, when her mom is like, oh, she just drives me crazy, you can see that Buffy is on the verge of saying the same thing about her mother. Like, oh, she's just driving me crazy.
I think that's one of my favorite parts of this episode is seeing, because it fleshes out and gives us a little more insight into a lot of the adult characters, which we don't really see that much, including Principal Snyder. We get this lovely insight where he was, this kind of overeager follower wanting to basically do whatever he could seemingly to fit in with the quote unquote cool kids. And, now as an adult, maybe he is acting out some residual resentment from his teenage years and going after the teenagers that he so desperately wanted to hang out with, the type of kid he so desperately wanted to hang out with and be when he was a teenager.
Right.
And then
he singles Buffy and her friends out all the time for like,
so much.
He's so annoyed by them. But then that's the only people he wants to talk to at the Bronze. Like, everybody else is talking to other candied up adults, and he wants to be with them. It reminds me of there was this partner at the law firm I was at who I just didn't have a good relationship with, and he didn't like me, and he
Mm.
told me he didn't like me, which I don't think was very professional of him. But
Well,
also, whenever there was like a law firm social event, he would like find me and monopolize my time. And so
yeah.
there's one interpretation of that behavior where it's like, no, he actually did like me
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't want to. And so he was mean to me, but
Oh
then
yeah.
also wanted to hang out with me. It was
Kind of that
confusing for
classic
me.
resentment and projection,
Yeah.
making a mess of things. But I do like how we see how similar Joyce and Buffy are. It's
Yeah.
just fantastic seeing Joyce, telling Buffy, she's not really ready to drive and she's not going to let her use the car. And there's an issue with Buffy's kind of recklessness and willingness to disobey her parental figures like Joyce and Giles, and Buffy running away and kind of seeming to always either seek out danger or be in a place where danger finds her. And then as soon as we see teenage Joyce, she's also pretty reckless
Yep.
and
She's into the
kind
bad
of,
boy.
oh yeah, which is so funny because I don't care if Angel's a good vampire. He would be the definition of a bad boy. Plus, how much older he is than her. That's a huge factor. But Joyce is so similar to
Yeah.
how Buffy is. And then when the roles reverse and Buffy is now in that parental state, she's just like her mother.
Yeah.
And it's great because I think, you can see that they both hold on to this experience going forward in the show. It's something that's not forgotten.
Yeah.
And
They
it gives
learn from
both
it.
of them, a little bit of understanding of the other. And it reminds Joyce of what it was like to be a teenager and what she was like as a teenager. And it gives Buffy an idea of what her mother has to deal with when dealing with her. And I just love that role reversal. And
Yeah. It's very
Joyce even
Freaky
seemed a
Friday,
little,
but
yes.
with a hellmouth twist. It's
Yeah.
they don't literally change lives, but they get to see each other into each other's lives. And
Mm.
you're right, it's a wonderful turnabout and it does give
Mm.
us so much insight.
I've got to ask you,
Yeah.
did this episode remind you, or at least the Joyce and Buffy stuff in this episode, did it remind you of Surprise? Because I couldn't stop thinking about that, especially because of the scene in the kitchen. Early on in both episodes, there's a scene in the kitchen where, Buffy is wanting to do things or wanting to
Yeah.
drive. And I
And
think
they're
it's even in
it's like over
Surprise.
breakfast. Yeah.
Yeah. And Joyce is hesitant and it's like, I don't think you're ready. And in Surprise, that's kind of this commentary or metaphor for Buffy not being ready to lose her virginity, right? Like
Right.
that's what that episode is kind of focused on. And then in this episode, Buffy is still insisting that she's ready to drive. And she's like, I've watched, all the films or whatever with the blood and the corpses that they show you to like make an impact. It's like, I'm ready. And Joyce is just like,
No.
no, don't think you're ready. And turns out they're kind of both right.
Yeah.
Buffy, we see her driving skills and
They're
she
not
makes
smooth.
some terrifying turns. And poor Willow being like, do you know that you have the parking brake on? And Buffy's like, oh yeah, of course. And it's very clear that Buffy still has some growing to do, but she is going to be put in situations that force her to grow.
Yeah.
And I could not stop thinking about their conversation in Surprise as I watched this episode and how similar it felt. Because she definitely has some negative consequences in this episode, and she had some negative consequences after having sex with Angel, which I don't love that it could be seen as a comment on purity if you look
Yeah,
at
the
it
sort
through
of
that
horror
lens.
trope of once you have sex, you get
Yeah.
killed
I
for
don't
girls.
love that.
But
But
I think it's intentionally playing into the trope, the
mhm,
season 2 with Angel, so that they could like draw out the trope and like really dig into it. Like,
that makes sense.
having sex makes you get punished is like the whole
Mhm.
second half of the season.
Yeah.
Instead of like in horror movies where it's like treated like, yeah, having sex did have you get punished and now you're dead and off the
Yeah.
movie. Like
Yeah.
it's
It's a
a
learning
yeah.
experience.
I think it's an intentional choice to sort of
Yeah.
use the trope in a new way.
Well, and it also is not entirely far off in terms of the stakes being raised sometimes when you do choose to have sex with someone you care about. But I am glad that they didn't do the stereotypical kind of bad
Yeah.
woman for wanting to have
Yeah,
sex.
Giles was very sweet and supportive of her when he
Ugh,
figured out what was going on. Remember, he was like,
I
"You won't
love
get
that.
judgment from me. You'll only get support and my respect." And it was so important in that exact moment because Buffy was 100% blaming herself for
Oh
what
yeah.
happened to Angel, and she was expecting everyone else to be like, "This is your fault. Like, you shouldn't have done that." And her mother didn't react that way either. Her mother was like upset about the lack of communication between them, not
Right.
about Buffy having sex. At no point in that conversation did she make Buffy feel like she was, bad or immoral. It was all about their relationship and how Joyce wanted to be involved in big decisions in Buffy's life.
Yeah, that's true.
No slut shaming.
No, none of that. There were a couple of quotes and lines in this episode that maybe at this point I somewhat unfairly attribute to JW
Mm.
when he apparently had nothing to do writing wise with this episode. But now whenever somebody says something slightly creepy or sexist, I just automatically jump to JW. Like, I mean, it
I
was a funny
think
line.
it's a
Cordelia,
fair assumption
yeah. Well,
that he
we know how
deserves.
he stands.
Yeah.
And when Cordelia made the comment, I mean, it's a good line when she said, her mom keeps trying on her clothes and she thinks there should be an age limit to lycra pants, but her dad just locked himself in the bathroom for hours with old Esquires. I was like, oh God. Oh.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yuck.
not not entirely off base.
We don't get to find out how Oz's parent. We never meet Oz's parents,
I
and
know.
he says his parents ate a ton, and I'm like, oh, are we gonna get to see what happened? And we didn't get to see what happened. Uh, that's one
Seriously.
of those things that would be a fun. Maybe there's like, I don't know, a fanfic out there where somebody addressed it because I would just like to know what Oz's parents. I want to know everything about Oz's parents. Actually, I'm
I
fascinated
know.
to know who produced
And
this
his
person.
family too. Like I want to know a bit more about Jordy
Yeah.
and the issues of raising a werewolf from a baby onward. Like
Listeners,
there's got to be fanfic out there for that.
if they address this in the comics or the novels and
Yeah,
where, like, let us know. That would be cool. I would like to read that because that
for
wouldn't surprise
sure.
me if they addressed it in the comics, that there's like maybe like an Oz miniseries or something like that.
That would be great. Missed opportunity in the
Yeah.
show.
uh I want to talk a little bit about some of Joyce as a teenager stuff because it's all just so delightful.
Hmm.
First off, that she and Giles are hanging out in his living room, sitting on the floor, listening to albums,
Yes.
which is like, oh, that was like so many afternoons in high school. And
Hmm.
if we had booze, we were drinking it, but not always. And there was usually at least one person smoking cigarettes and being moody and dark like Ripper. And I was I was a little bit like Joyce, just being like, yeah, I'm also really into Led Zeppelin because I just wanted to be liked
Mhm.
by the group, you know?
Well,
Uh,
and the song that they chose, is one of my favorite like classic rock songs, that Sunshine of Your Love by Cream, which is just so perfect for the vibe of this episode
yeah.
too. And fun fact we can talk about in the spoiler section, but this song comes up again. But it's just, there's something so immediately what's the right word? Like, it transports you to
Yeah,
a certain time
it's a time
when you
warp
see
song.
them. It's
And the
excellent.
and the sitting on the floor, and there's at least one shot from overhead, and Giles is
Mm,
lying down and Joyce is sitting on the floor, and it really was. I was like, "Oh, that's my teenage years. There I am."
yeah.
It wasn't Cream, it was usually Led Zeppelin that I was pretending and eventually was like legitimately into, but at
Yep.
first, or Jethro Tull. I had to pretend to like Jethro
Yes.
Tull a lot.
I love Jethro Tull. This is all my dad. My dad was very much so like, I am going to indoctrinate you for all of this classic, like solid rock music, and you will like it. And folk
Because my
music.
father was a much older and from uh, you know, a much older generation, the music that I got introduced to by my dad was like big band swing music
Nice.
from the
Also
30s and
fun.
40s. Yeah, great stuff, which then suddenly became super trendy in the 90s. Do you remember when that was like
Oh,
everywhere and
yeah.
everybody was swing
Like
dancing?
Zoot Suit Riot came out.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
That
all those
new.
bands came out like Squirrel Nut Zippers, and they had, swing dancing was a big thing. There was that Gap swing ad where they
Mhm.
did swing dancing in khakis. It was just very much
Oh,
in the
yeah.
zeitgeist. But for
Oh gosh, I
years,
forgot about that ad. You
yeah.
just unlocked a memory. Oh my gosh.
But when I like started going to public school and kids were into different bands, I had no clue. I was
Mm.
like, "Oh, I've listened to classical music and jazz." Like I didn't have any kind of musical education from my parents. I
Yeah.
had a little bit from an older brother who played guitar, and so I learned a lot of Jim Croce when I was a
Nice.
kid. But, yeah, I was very out of water for, like, middle school and the beginning of high school. I didn't know what
Mm.
was cool, and so I would just sort of pretend, and when I see Joyce being like, "Do you like Seals and Croft?" And he's like,
Oh, yeah.
"What?" And she's like, "Nah, me either." I'm like,
Yeah, she's
"Oh,
like, "No."
Joyce, I feel you in this moment. I see
Yep.
you. You're just
We've
trying to be
all been
cool."
there, either pretending to like a band we didn't like, maybe because someone we had a crush on was into it, or pretending not to like something
Oh,
that we
yeah.
liked. And that, oh, my heart. So I thought it'd be fun also. Fun fact, Sunshine of Your Love was Cream's first and highest charting American single,
Mhm.
and it kind of hit its peak of popularity in 1968. So I thought it was fun that this was the song they chose 30 years later in
Yeah.
1998. So I went back and looked at 30 years ago, which would be 1994, which was kind of a painful realization at the same time. And some of the number one songs throughout that year, one was The Power of Love, which I love and just makes me think of Back to the Future. But it was the Celine Dion Power of Love.
Oh,
So I was like, I don't think that's the equivalent. There was The Sign by Ace of Base, which I definitely associate with my elementary school 5th grade year. And the kind of overarching song that took over that year was I'll Make Love to You by Boys to
Oh,
Men,
yeah. Boys to Men hit
which,
big right then.
yes, and it's excellent. So I'm just picturing, in the future, if right now, if they were sitting around listening to songs nostalgic of their teenage times 30 years ago, it would be like Ace of Base, or Bump and Grind by R. Kelly was another one. We'll just, you know,
I think if it was a person who was a personality like Ripper, that the music from that era they would have been listening to would have been like Tribe Called
Nirvana.
Quest, Nirvana. Oh yeah, they'd be way into
Mhm.
grunge, right? So there'd be a
Green
lot
Day.
of Pearl Jam
Oh yeah,
and some
Stone
of the
Temple
more
Pilots.
the tragic like emo,
Oh, yes.
pre-emo grunge bands. I think that's where
I did look up
94 Ripper would be.
the rock and roll charts
Uh-huh.
in 1994. Green Day's When I Come Around, which I did not realize
That's a
that song was
30-year-old
30.
song?
I know. But I was like, excellent song. Pearl Jam's Better Man. Do you remember Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden? God, I hadn't heard that song in forever. I basically made a playlist yesterday as I was going through and listening to all of these. But I would definitely see more of a, like you said, Pearl Jam, maybe Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana.
Metallica. He'd be one of
yeah.
those guys who's like, no, you have to listen to the lyrics for one, and then you'll understand.
Not so much a Counting Crows guy. That I love Mr. Jones. That
Yeah,
came
but
out.
that's a radio hit, so that's
Not so much Giles' style.
no.
Alice in Chains, The Cure, like just Offspring maybe. I don't know. It was an interesting time.
Yeah.
But it just cracks me up watching
cute.
them.
I love it.
Out.
And the cigarettes are funny when Giles rolls the cigarette what is it? Box. In his sleeve. I can't believe I don't remember the word for that. In his sleeve, like that was hilarious. How he keeps like making his hair more messy. I love that. He's vain. He's looking in the mirror and he's like doing his hair. Joyce though, with the like
I love it.
Is it interesting being from England or exciting being from England? Like, no, it's just where he's from. You think that. And then when he steals the coat for her, the very Juice Newton coat, and she's like, "Oh, you're so brave." It's like, no, he's a vandal. He's like it's not brave at all, but whatever.
Like,
It
damn it,
impresses
Joyce.
Joyce.
This should not be turning you on.
In case people don't know who Juice Newton is, she was a very popular pop singer in the early 80s with her biggest hits being Playing with the Queen of Hearts and my favorite, Angel of the Morning.
That is
Love
a good song.
And she did kind of dress like that, like a feathered long coat. I would have probably said very Stevie Nicks, but definitely Juice Newton works as well, especially for Joyce, that would have been when she was about 17. She would have been listening to Juice Newton, so that's it all tracks. And then she compares Ripper to Burt Reynolds, which is hilarious.
I know. I love that. I just immediately thought of Burt Reynolds naked on the bearskin rug. And
the classic Playgirl
the first thing
centerfold
to come into my head.
That's funny. I automatically thought of him in Boogie Nights as the like porn king
that
who
makes
like
more
runs
sense.
the porn industry. But I know she wasn't referring to that. I don't remember when Boogie Nights came out, but that's not what she was referring to. She was referring to his like heyday when he was like Any Which Way But Loose and what's
very
the one
different
with the
from
car?
him. And
there's like a car
Boogie
racing
Nights.
one. Yeah, Boogie Nights. I remember when he was cast in Boogie Nights that the press around that was like, "What a brilliant move to cast Burt Reynolds in this role!" Like everybody was really excited about it.
Oh gosh, was it Smokey and the Bandit?
Smokey and the Bandit. That's the one I couldn't remember. And then didn't he do one with a monkey, Any Which Way But Loose, where he drives a truck and he has a chimpanzee as like a co-pilot?
It sounds kind of familiar.
I kind of feel like I even saw that one in the theater with my family.
I think of that and what is the football one?
Oh, right.
Longest Yard.
The Longest Yard.
That was a good one.
Yeah. The remake of that was
He's in some interesting movies from the 90s onward, especially.
Yeah. He has a really interesting career. I respect an actor who can play character parts when they're used to being a leading man. I think that's really, really cool and shows like true acting.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Can we talk about my favorite villain, Ethan Rayne?
I love that he was back every time.
I never get tired of Ethan Rayne, and I never get tired of seeing Buffy hit him in the face.
Right.
He is a merchant of chaos. Quite literally, he worships chaos, and he just likes to create chaos. He's like
Mhm.
the ultimate narcissist in that he, there are people who just thrive on chaos and love chaos in real life, and they
Mhm.
create drama wherever they go, and you can tell that like energizes them. They're like, oh,
Oh, yeah.
now everybody's talking about this gossip thing that I made up. Like, they get so excited. And Ethan is this guy. He just likes to stir the pot and make things like happen that are crazy. And he's the perfect foil for Joyles, who is so buttoned down and wants to create order. And he's a librarian, like the people who sort things and number them and categorize them. And Ethan
Mhm.
is like, I want everything to get all mixed up and crazy. And the fact that they were friends when they were kids, I love the long history of their relationship.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the effect he had on Joyles in this, where Joyles was like, hit him again, and you're my slayer, like, you have to hit him if I tell you to.
I think that is one of my
Brilliant.
favorite parts when, he's all worked up and he's like, hit him. And Buffy's like, hold on. And he's like, you're my slayer. Go knock his teeth down his throat. And, Buffy just kind of rolls her eyes. But then Ethan, of course, is very hittable and isn't cooperating. So when she finally hits him, and Joyles has that adorable little like leap in the air with a fist punch and just
Yeah,
goes,
like
yes.
like his team just scored.
Yeah,
Like he's
that
so happy, and
was so cute.
it's so hilarious. And then he leans in and he's like, hit him again.
Yeah, come on.
In my memory, he was more like Drusilla, like, do it again, like she was with the judge. And so when I was watching the episode, I was like, oh no, it's even better that he just
Yeah.
leans in, like, yeah,
And
hit him again.
he's so like attractive, which I don't know what that says about me in this episode. Like some of it, I'm like, oh, you idiot. Like, of course, this is what you would be like as a teenage boy.
Yeah.
But I love it when Buffy, shows up to the warehouse factory or whatever where they're making the candy. And one, it's interesting because there are all these adults outside, and I want to know how they knew that's where the candy was.
Yeah.
How did they
unclear
end up gravitating there? And then, of course, as she's walking in, she's like ready and determined and marches past Joyles and Joyce making out and has to do like a double take and goes back over to them. And poor Buffy, that must have been horrifying. But I absolutely love how when she's kind of confronting both of them, especially Joyles, she takes the cigarette out of Giles' mouth
stomps
and
it out.
stomps it out with her foot. And the move that he makes, like, I'm your watcher and you need to listen to me. And when he kind of like goes to swipe his hair back to pull the cigarette out and relights it again, that is just
it's
glorious.
so bratty. So I ended up writing down in my notes, we're going to end up objectifying Anthony Stewart Head again a whole bunch, because bratty teen fake brave Joyles is hot. And when he was doing the action sequence in the warehouse with Buffy and jumped over the conveyor belt thing, that was hot. And then when he wants Buffy to punch Ethan in the face and he's jumping up and down, that's hot. So, I'm going to own it that this is a little bit of, objectifying, but I don't think that it's in a bad way, because
no, I think that honestly
commentary
was part of what's intended in the episode, because Joyce is attracted to him, and that's this whole different side of Giles coming out. He's usually all buttoned up and reserved, so inevitably when he lets loose a little bit, it's going to be attractive.
It's really
plus
hot.
his accent. I love the accent change.
Oh yeah,
when
he
goes
more...
from Giles to Ripper.
Yeah,
he
less
sounds
posh.
more like Spike.
Yeah, he gets less posh, and it makes me think that he grew up posh, right? We don't know a ton about Giles's backstory, but he went to Oxford and all this stuff. I think he grew up in a pretty posh family, and during his rebellious teen years, he took on an affectation of a lower social class, and so he has this different accent. And I have known so many people that have gone through their like pretending to be poor phase when they really came from big money. And it was always so hard to swallow for somebody who grew up with, like, I mean, we always had food on the table and a shelter
Yeah.
over our heads, but like there was not a lot of money. So it was so hard when I would find out that some like trust fund person was pretending to be poor. There was a group that used to like to panhandle in Harvard Square as like a sport to see how much money they would get, but they lived out in like the wealthy suburbs. It was a thing in the
That's
90s.
disgusting.
Yeah, all those people are always white, right? They're
Oh,
always
yeah.
well to do, and it's just hard for me to take. And so as much as I love hot teen Ripper, I'm a little part of me is like, that accent is phony. You
Yeah.
are putting on a show. And then I'm like, well, he's a teenager, so we all put on shows when we were teenagers.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's still trying to figure out who they are. And it's funny, you know, you mentioned that pretending to be poor. I was definitely fortunate growing up. Like, we were not, then by no means were we wealthy, but it was one of those situations where if we struggled, and I know there were a few instances of that, I was not aware of it. And then when I got to middle school, the way the zoning was for our neighborhoods, the middle school that was closest to me was definitely more diverse and, you know, in terms of race, socioeconomic status, all of that. But my street was like one street over to the cutoff for this other middle school, which was farther away and was I think it was one of the wealthiest public middle schools in the state. And I will never forget the first week of 6th grade and seeing all these girls with what I would later learn were Louis Vuitton purses. I just was like, oh, that's a cute purse that's multicolored. And that one has a flower with a smiley face on it. And I remember going home and describing the purse to my mom and asking, I was like, oh, these girls have this really cute purse. And as I described it to her, she was just like, oh, honey, no, like that's,
We're not
she was
Louis
like, that's,
Vuitton purse people. Yeah.
yeah, she was like, that's very expensive. And she was like, you know, that's something that, you know, we can't really afford, and it's a very nice purse, but we can find you something that you like. And I just remember being so confused at first, like, why can't I have this purse? And those same kids growing up and then transitioning to high school, it was when, you know, I think Nelly was really popular when I was going from middle school to high school. And the ridiculousness of these super wealthy, privileged white kids in Texas starting to imitate that accent was, one, racially offensive and just horrific. Even as a teenager, I was like, you guys are absolutely ridiculous. But it was the same kind of thing. Like, and
It makes me so
dressing
embarrassed to
that
be white
way.
sometimes.
Yes, I was just like, this is horrible. Does nobody see how offensive and ridiculous this is, that you're basically cosplaying someone who has struggled due to their race or socioeconomic status? And I remember one guy in particular wanted an Escalade so bad, ended up with an Escalade with giant rims, and would constantly drive around playing Gangsta's Paradise by Coolio.
Oh my God.
And I was like, I could write a paper about this. Like, this is absurd. But that is pretty, you know, similar to what Joyles is doing when he embodies Ripper as a teenager. Because it's made clear, like you said, throughout the rest of the series, that Joyles was not struggling for money. Like, going to Oxford is an incredibly privileged thing. And it's weird how teenagers do that.
Yeah.
And it seems to be a lot of white teenagers.
Yeah, I think, well, we could get into a whole tangent about, I think
That's
that
true.
that by lumping all of the different cultures together and calling it white, the sort of
Yeah.
people that want whiteness to be this determining factor have
Yeah.
done a real disservice in erasing a lot of culture and identity that would be handed down in families, that it just becomes like this amorphous whiteness. And I think
Yeah.
it leaves some teenagers just dying for like a clear
Yes.
delineated identity they can cling on to. And unfortunately, they borrow from cultures that have historically been oppressed by white people. And like
Yeah.
from the standpoint of like teenagers try on different personas, like I'm all for it, but
Mm-hmm.
somebody needs to step in once in a while and be like, that one's not okay.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like,
what
guys, no.
this particular identity you're trying on is racially
That-
insensitive, and
yeah. It's
I'd
like,
like
that's
to
not for you.
help
No,
you learn
no.
why that is, and
Yeah.
we can help you out with that. It's like, how many white girls in the 90s were sort of like faux Native Americans with like
Oh,
feathers in
yeah.
their hair and like wearing fringe and Native American patterns, and it was super
Mhm.
trendy. And now when I see images of it, it like makes my skin crawl. But at the
Yeah.
time, I thought it was like cool. I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
When you learn to do better, you do better.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned that. This is the last thing I'll say on it, because this would be a whole other tangent, but that's still kind of an issue currently.
Yeah.
I don't know how nationwide. Kendra Scott is a jeweler out of Austin, Texas. And I know if you're on TikTok, she kind of took off with the popularity of Alabama Rush and all of these schools showcasing their rush process and these girls posting what jewelry they were wearing. And Kendra Scott is very popular in college. I think I first got, a Kendra Scott set of earrings in like 2009, 2010, before she really exploded. But recently, she has put out a collection called the Yellow Rose Collection that's supposed to be a Western collection,
Hmm.
partnering with Wrangler. And it's just the style of jewelry is so, it's Native American. Like, it's classic styles. There's a lot of turquoise, but it's not real turquoise stone. It's turquoise, what is it? Magnesite?
Oh, where they
Magnesite.
take like dusts and then compress them into a new stone.
Yeah. And it's, it's dyed and it's pretty, but it's a softer stone and it's not authentic. And so that's kind of been something that has been gathering attention, is how, one, she's making it with lower quality jewels and
Hmm.
stones, and partnering with Wrangler and showcasing it as Western cowboy when it
It's
is
really
really Native
indigenous.
American and
Yeah.
indigenous people. And there are plenty of indigenous jewelers out there that sell excellent, authentic pieces. And so it's created this conversation, especially in Texas, about whether or not she should have partnered with, somebody else, or if Wrangler should have gone with an indigenous individual who makes jewelry. And it's one of those things that I have been shocked by some of the comments that I've seen
Yeah.
where people are like, it's not a big deal. Don't make it a big deal. And I was like,
That's not for
yeah.
you to say.
Yeah, I was like, open your mind just a little bit. Just a bit.
I will
But
admit that the concept of cultural appropriation is a hard one to completely grasp
mhm,
for a white person who grew up in America where we were sold hard on the melting pot concept, where it's like
mhm.
all the cultures get mixed together and then we have this one big mishmash culture. And
Yeah.
I'm still unlearning that, of being like, I don't have a right to other people's culture just because they moved to this country. And I mean, I really believed it when I was a kid. I was like, the melting pot, I'm part of the melting
Yeah.
pot. And it's only been in the last like 10 or 20 years that there's been any kind of public attention on this conversation. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to grasp what is and is not cultural appropriation, and
Mhm.
what the harm is, right? They're like, so they copied the designs and sold them. Who cares? It's like, well, sometimes they copy religiously significant designs and sell them as like shower
Yeah.
curtains, and that's just
Ugh.
offensive. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're stealing the work of an artist and getting money from it, profiting from it, literally taking money out of the hands of an indigenous artist or even an original artist. There
Yeah.
was a line in episode 2 of Echo about it. There's, that whole
Mm.
show is about Choctaw Indians, and I don't know if it's correct to say Indians ever. Anyway, Choctaw
Yeah.
people, and there's a scene where there's like white tourists in a shop, and they're like, "Do you have any Navajo rugs?" And the shopkeeper is like, "You could go to Anthropology and get whatever ethnically ambiguous schmata you want." And it killed me because
That's funny.
Anthropology is one of the worst offenders. They
Oh,
do this
yeah.
all the time, and Urban Outfitters is shameless.
Yeah.
And they don't only steal from cultural people, they also just steal blatantly from like
Mhm.
Etsy artists, and like they
It's
are
wild.
they are the worst. And I regret ever shopping there, which I have done.
Yeah.
Okay, we went on a big
Ugh.
tangent there.
Yeah. Tying us back in.
Yeah.
The last time, this is just kind of funny, it doesn't mean anything, but the last time we saw Ethan Rayne, of course, was Halloween, which obviously deals with trick-or-treating. So I love that the second time we see him, it's
It's candy.
adults going over candy, like going crazy over candy. It just seems kind of nice and perfect.
Yeah.
And he's just this little human chaos demon stirring up stuff. It must have been good candy, though.
Yeah, people were really
Everybody
enjoying
was
it.
like
Maybe
fighting
they
over
used
it.
Ted's recipe of some kind of form of ecstasy to make the candy extra
Seriously,
addictive.
that's kind of funny.
I loved
But
Trick's introduction of Ethan Rayne, where he's like, "I know a beast who knows a guy. He's worked this town before."
it's good to see Mr. Trick again.
I love him so much.
He's just so funny.
He's so
And
funny.
we see the mayor in this episode, and is this the first time we learn that he's basically made a bunch of deals with demons, or did we
It's
already know that?
that specifically, I think, is the first time we know that, but we know from last episode that he's, shady,
That's
and that
right.
he's willing to work with vampires.
It's just weird to I'm like, I mean, I get it, not poo-pooing on being a mayor, but it's just funny to me that that was his ambition. If he's going to make all these deals with demons, like aim a little higher. Like
Yeah.
mayor of Sunnydale is what you want control over, which I mean, I guess the Hellmouth aspect could factor into it, but it just cracks me up.
Yeah.
And he's so good at being just creepy and threatening without
With this
raising his
like
voice or being violent.
candy coated sweetness over the top of
Yeah.
it.
Like the way he talked to Mr. Trick at the end, and Mr. Trick's making the joke, the comment kind of saying, like, the way I see it, I did you a favor. Like, you've got one less demon to pay tribute to. And the mayor kind of circling behind him. Even though I knew it didn't happen, I still had the feeling he was going to snap his neck or something, or
Yeah.
try to kill him. And what does he say? Something like, be careful of any
Yeah.
more favors you do for me, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Like, don't do me.
But it's
Yeah.
very ominous. And he has this affect about him, kind of, almost sitcom-y.
Yeah.
And it just makes him so much creepier to me. Like when you have a villain like the Master, and he's this ancient vampire, he's evil, he's supposed to say all the evil, creepy things. It's like, okay, fine. But with the mayor, it just seems so much more sinister that he
Yeah.
presents as this like kind of friendly, jovial politician.
Yeah. It's creepier, indeed. He walks among us, right? Hiding in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you think about who else in our society is like literally a demon in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
It's pretty disturbing to think about it too much.
Well, and I like that line. It's very brief when Schneider is, tagging along with Buffy and Oz and Willow, and they finally make the connection that it's the candy that's causing the adults to act this way. And Buffy kind of confronts Snyder and like, you have to know basically, who is this from? Where is it coming from? And he was like, I don't know. It was the school board proposed it. And he kind of has this one-off line where he's like, if you knew those people, or like if you
Or that
knew
crowd.
that crowd. And I was just like, is it just like normal school board crazies, or
Is it
have
Hellmouth?
demons like have they infiltrated the school board? Because obviously the mayor and Snyder have been connected for over a season,
Yeah.
and it's just like,
but
how
not as
deep does
connected
this go?
as Snyder would like to be, right? Snyder is
yeah.
like, I'm close with the mayor, but he
Mhm.
doesn't know what the mayor's up to at all. He only knows like
No.
the little dribs and drabs the mayor tells him.
The mayor is now the cool kid that Snyder is tagging along behind, wanting to impress and
Yeah.
be friends with.
Armin Shimmerman in this episode was killing it. He was so funny. At the Bronze, he was hilarious. Like, whoa, there's some foxy ladies here tonight.
Oh,
like,
gosh.
I was like, oh, I knew that guy in high school. He was so annoying. And the way that he just comes with Buffy and Oz and Willow, like they don't have any choice. He just follows them. Like, I definitely knew people like that you could not get rid of. You'd be like, oh my God, this guy is like Velcro. Like, he will not go away. But my all-time favorite moment is when he kind of hits on Joyce. When he's like, so are you like going steady? And she just rolls her eyes and walks away. And I had forgotten about that. And I had also sort of forgotten that Joyce hates Snyder already, right?
Yeah.
So Teen Joyce isn't going to be any more amenable to Rat Boy, as Buffy called him. And
especially since he is definitely not her type.
No, she likes a bad boy. But she is the single nicest person on television, right? Like, she is sweet, compassionate, lovely human being, and she can't stand Snyder.
It's so funny.
She cannot bring herself to even be a little nice to him. Like, she hates him.
Their body language, the choices that they made, both of them, as they're sitting on that, like, I think it's a conveyor belt, and she's got her cool coat on and these knee-high boots, and she's got her legs crossed, and she's just like, eating candy, and Snyder is sitting there with his legs kind of swinging.
Yeah, because he's so short.
He just looks so much more, juvenile and just patently uncool.
Yeah, and then he like sidles up next to her. And she's like, ugh.
Like, what are you doing? And his whole, like, the voice change that he has, where it gets just a little bit higher and squeakier.
Yeah.
Like when they're leaving the Bronze, and he's just like, hey, where are we going? Wait up, you guys.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys aren't trying to ditch me, are you? And it's like, oh my gosh, man. And when he, sidles up to them at the Bronze and is kind of staring at Oz, and he just goes, you've got great hair, and Oz looks so uncomfortable. But it's
you can also tell that part of Oz was like, maybe my hair is really uncool.
Yep, he looks like he's thinking, he's reflecting in that moment. It's like, well, if Principal Snyder likes my hair,
yeah, that's a problem.
But that whole scene in the
Bronze scene
is brilliant.
It's comedy gold. The Louie guys on stage.
Yes.
Oh my God. And the one guy with no shirt but his tie is on.
Yeah, Willow's doctor.
Yeah.
Like, I love that line where she's like, I don't like this. They could have heart attacks. And Buffy's like, well, maybe there's a doctor here. And Willow looks up. She's like, I think that is my doctor. And it's, guy shirtless with just a tie, stage diving. And she goes, he's usually less topless. I cannot imagine that scenario. But also, that would make me feel so hopeless as a teenager, realizing that all of our authority figures, like everyone who we typically look up to, is basically so far gone and not going to be of any help. Like when they see Miss Barton, who does not seem wasted, she seems high, as
Yeah.
all get out, because she's like, Willow, that's a tree, and calls her little tree.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, oh, it's just too good.
It's
Too good.
it's definitely one of my favorite Buffy episodes ever. And if I'm ever like having a day and I need a pick me up, sometimes this is what I'll watch because
Mhm.
there's just so many little funny moments, and
It's a good one.
there's no really big, huge, deep, like heavy thing to think about with this episode. So it's a
That's
relief
true.
from
It's
some of the
very
heaviness
light.
of the season. And I never get tired of sexy Ripper Giles. Like that's just
Mm-mm.
always fun.
It is a treat.
I love it. Is it exciting being from England? Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So bad at flirting.
Yeah.
So cute. But I do, you know, one thing about this episode that I do not enjoy seeing is the continuation of Xander and Willow's inappropriate flirtation and, back and forth relationship, kind
Yeah.
of right in front of their significant others. Like that scene where they're playing footsie under the table.
Yeah, Cordy's
Cordelia is
right
like a
there.
table away. And that is just, it's so painful. And especially how it's juxtaposed with Cordelia having just made that comment to Buffy saying, like, that's pre-X or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's before Xander, just showing how important Xander is to her. And we know she loves him. And Xander is just this greedy little shit that wants all this female attention, and it will forever infuriate me that Willow had a crush on him for years,
And
was
he never
right
did
in
anything
front
about
of
it.
him. Yeah, nothing until he is happy and she's happy with Oz. So, that scene back where was it what episode was it where Oz is locked in Beauty and the Beast, where Oz is in the cage, and
Yeah.
when Xander is kind of preparing to switch places with Willow, he seems to get jealous of Willow's comment about like only seeing like the half Monty when it
Yeah.
comes to Oz. And it just, I know he's a teenage boy, but it makes me so angry with how careless he is with Willow's feelings and Cordelia's, especially because in this episode, the way that Oz's face lights up when he's on stage in the bronze and he
Oh, and
sees
he
Willow
sees
and
Willow.
Buffy come in, he looks so happy, and he's so just genuinely in love with her when Buffy makes a comment like, isn't she cute when, I can't remember what she was
Whatever it
doing.
is.
And
Oh, when she's proud. Yeah.
yes, and
He's
Oz is
like,
like,
she's
she's
always cute.
always cute. I was like, ugh, my heart.
Yeah. He's so perfect. Oz is so perfect.
He really is.
It's a little
Like,
annoying sometimes. It's like, have a
yeah.
flaw, man.
Yeah, it's like, he doesn't even have like a temper, really, or anything. It's like, all right. And even, well, there's spoiler. We can talk about that later. But he just all around is a very empathetic, understanding, intelligent, great human being.
Yeah.
Speaking of intelligent, I also love that Cordelia is incredibly smart when it comes to test taking and taking the SATs.
What? I
That
can't
makes
have
me
layers?
happy. It's like, yes, you can.
Yes.
That
And
is
it's not actually
fantastic.
surprising to me. Like, it's clear that Cordelia is together, right? She's like a person who gets good grades and is popular and does a sport and does, like, there's every reason to believe that she's headed for Stanford or, UC Berkeley or something. Like she is the kind of person whose life is together, and Xander is the kind of person whose life is a disaster, and they never were going to work out in the long run.
And we know that Xander has, he has a difficult home life. We get a bunch of little references to that throughout the series. I can't remember when this happens. During the holidays, it's kind of clear that he doesn't want to be at home because it's kind
Yeah.
of tumultuous.
It's how he
And
and Willow became such good friends, is that
yeah.
he would always spend Christmas at her house, even though she's Jewish. Her family doesn't celebrate Christmas,
Hmm.
but for him, it was better than being with his family. I mean,
And I can have some empathy
I have compassion for
there.
that. I do, but
Yeah.
his sexual possessiveness of all the women in his life is annoying. I can't,
Yeah. Well, because I remember, that was ugh, a struggle in high school. And I was fortunate because I had a pretty good relationship with my dad, and I felt comfortable talking to him about most stuff. And he kind of drilled it into me like, jealousy is not worth your time. It's silly. He's like, you can't own anyone, you can't control anyone. If someone is going to, be in a relationship with you and then cheat on you, let them. That tells you everything you need to know about them. And they weren't who you thought they were. And like made it clear that if a guy starts showing certain signs, like that is something you run away from. But I also remember a bunch of my friends who, you know, had pretty strict parents and wouldn't talk to them about anything, getting into these relationships where that possessiveness and jealousy was seen as, oh, he really cares about me, or
yeah.
oh, that means
I
he
mean,
really loves me. And it's hard
romance
to
novels and
mm,
rom-coms have for decades been telling girls and women that
mhm.
jealousy and possessiveness equals love, and even sometimes
Ugh.
that violence equals love. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
about time that those messages start getting upended, and there is change happening. But
Hmm.
the messaging is deep in our culture, and a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
people believe it.
I just think back to freaking Twilight and Edward Cullen. And I understand, like I read occasional, like it's not straight up fairy smut, but kind of high fantasy romance books. It's like Sarah J. Maas was kind of problematic, but I really did enjoy the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses. And as an adult who I feel like is well rounded and adjusted now in terms of, you know, knowing what is healthy and what is not healthy in a romantic partnership, I can appreciate every now and then a little bit of that, like, if he touches you, he's dead kind of trope in fantasy. Like, that I find
Yeah.
really attractive. But if someone was like that towards me in real life, I
Yeah.
would immediately no, like, just that's an immediately nope for me. So I can't I don't like it when it's portrayed in teenage relationships and normalized in teenage relationships.
Yeah.
Freaking
I agree.
Xander. We still need to have somebody on that loves Xander because
Yeah. I feel bad how much we trash
yep.
him.
He is
And
hilarious.
he gets a
Like
lot of the funny lines, and
yep.
I do believe that Nicholas Brendan is not the person who, you know, is possessive of
Right.
women. It's just it's very unfortunate in a show that otherwise love so much.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to blame JW for that because he has said time and time again that Xander is basically him as a character. Like, Xander is his stand-in
His
essentially.
avatar.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's his fault. But I
Yep.
do really love that line at the beginning when they're talking about the SATs, and he's kind of spinning off. He's like, it's totally fascist. And personally, I think it discriminates against the uninformed. And I was like, well, yes, Xander. Yes, it does.
That is how tests work. That
That's just cute.
yeah. But he knew he wasn't going to do well on them. I wonder if Xander maybe had some form of learning disability and would have benefited from some
Yep.
guidance and special education teachers in his educational history. I have a
Could see
friend
it.
who does that kind of work, and it's fascinating all of the different types of learning disabilities there are, and how many more that we know about now than we did then, or like when I was a kid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't even a thing. Like, it wasn't even in the
Oh, yeah.
conversation. And looking back on some of the people I knew in high school, I'm like, oh yeah, oh, that
Mm-hmm.
kid really needed some help, and they were not getting
Right.
it from the
It's just
school.
so
Yeah.
unfortunate. and that's another tangent. But there's, I remember in law school, there were accommodations that people with, attention deficit disorder or any other like dyslexia could have for test taking. And I still remember people getting all heated about how once you're, a practicing lawyer, you don't get extra time to prepare for trial or you don't get extra this. And I was like, it's not that serious. Like,
Yeah.
just calm down. Because meanwhile, half of you are also taking Adderall or speed or cocaine to get an
Yeah.
edge up on studying.
I was
But
such a nerd and just enough older than my classmates in law school that I didn't know about sort of recreational or study use of Adderall until my third year of law school when someone was like, "Oh, I use it all the time. It really
oh
helps
my
me
gosh.
with my grades and stuff." And I was like, "It's like using steroids in sports. You're
Yep.
cheating and we
Yep.
get graded on a curve." And like
Oh
the
yeah.
things should be fair and just and honest part of me was just livid.
Yeah, I
And
had a hard
and
time
this
with that.
person was like, "Oh, everybody does it." And I was like, "Everybody does it? No wonder
Mhm.
I am not at the top of the class. I'm not taking enough drugs." Like it was very
Yeah.
frustrating for me. I went through the same thing in high school when I learned about like paid SAT prep courses.
Yes.
And I was like, "That's a thing?" And everybody has like a special SAT tutor and I just went in there like
Mhm.
blind.
Or college consultants that ultimately end up writing people's essays and completing their applications for them.
Yeah.
So, fun fact, just a couple things. In law school, it was more rampant than I realized that people were cheating. For example, like if we would have an assignment as a class and we were told specifically not to work together, it had to be individual, people were getting together in groups and
Yeah.
doing it in less than half the time it would take me to do it by myself. And I was like, well, that's bullshit, but whatever. And learning now and being diagnosed with ADHD as an adult and
Yeah.
thinking about how much smoother a time I could have had, just slightly bitter. But there was one of my neighbors growing up had a daughter who was, I think, 3 years older than me. So when I was a freshman, she was a high school senior. And grades were something like it was just always important to me because I wanted to get into a good school, go to law school, blah, blah, blah. And my dad came in from talking to our neighbor one weekend just fuming. And I was just like, what the heck were you guys talking about out there? Like, what is wrong with you? And he told me how this guy, my neighbor's father, was bragging about how she had gotten into a few colleges that were more prestigious than she originally thought she was going to get into. And he was bragging about having written so many essays for her throughout high school that got A's or A pluses, and how he still had it after all these years. And now she was going to go to a great school. And I was just like, are you kidding me?
She's
My
gonna fall
dad,
in her face. You're gonna have to
yeah.
keep doing all her work for her
And
because she
she
hasn't
did.
learned. Yeah.
Karma came back around eventually, but my dad was just fuming that her parent was cheating with her and essentially teaching her that this is how you
Yeah.
get ahead. And I just, that type of thing drives me absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Although, if I were Buffy, I would probably be slightly tempted to have somebody take the SATs for me if I was worried about life and death and killing vampires. Like, that might be
Yeah.
one of these situations where I could understand it a little.
She's a unique case. Like, I mean, Cordelia, you called it. She's like, shouldn't there be special rules for her because she's the
Yeah.
Slayer? And
if Cordelia's saying that, like, come on.
yeah. We haven't talked about it, but I have just one thing I want to say about this, which is Angel doing Tai Chi. How does a vampire sweat?
I know. It doesn't
So
make
apparently
any
they don't
sense.
have blood flow. Their hearts don't beat. They don't need oxygen, but they obviously use oxygen because they speak and stuff. But sometimes
really,
they
that's the thing.
can't
How do
for
they
no
talk?
reason.
How do they
And
talk?
but how do they like? So the glands work, and like I've never seen a vampire drink water. What's he sweating out after
I
200,
know.
300 years of life?
It's so funny. They just had to make him sexy glistening
Yeah, they couldn't
doing
just
his
have
Tai Chi.
shirtless David Boreanaz, which is, we've
Yeah.
talked about this enough as well. That is perfectly sexy enough, but they had to make him sweaty, and it's ridiculous. I also don't understand why he's so weak. Like they never really, like, yeah, he
I
was in hell,
know.
but he seemed to
But
be able to run around, but then suddenly he like collapses. I don't know what his deal is.
and he didn't look like he'd lost any muscle while he
No, he
was in
looked,
a hell dimension. Like, I would assume he would have had to fight his ass off.
yeah.
Like, I don't know, but I did love I love Buffy's reaction. So my parents have recently gotten into Tai Chi, and I think I kind of just associate Tai Chi with older people, and a couple of like one of my close friends when I was growing up, he was second generation or first generation Chinese American. His parents had come over from China, and they would go every single weekend to their community center, and they would all do Tai Chi in the morning. So I associate it with older people and just his parents.
Yeah.
And so watching him do Tai Chi and Buffy coming in looking so impressed, saying, I didn't know you could do that. I was like, Buffy, everybody can do that.
It's not, we
It's
didn't
very
see
low
him do
impact.
anything very difficult. Yeah.
No. And I
But
don't know if she meant like controlling his emotions or like moving slowly and deliberately because he's
being
been
graceful.
struggling. Yeah. But it was a weird
Yeah,
it was a
like
weird
it would have
moment for a
been,
lot of reasons.
it would have made more sense if she'd walked in on him in a sort of complex yoga position that
Yeah.
is difficult to hold,
Even if he
right?
was doing, I don't know, what's an easy one? Like the tree pose, where you
Yeah.
just kind of have to have a little balance
Or like
like
Warrior
that.
1 and moving into Warrior
Yeah.
2, like something like that would have made more sense, but who cares? Tai Chi, fine.
But yeah, the sweating
Whatever.
thing, I was like, what are you sweating?
Yeah.
This doesn't make sense. You can't ever think too hard about it. The other thing that was funny with Angel, like this show seems to really love tricking you into thinking they're making some sort of condom or safe sex joke.
Mhm.
It's happened with Buffy and Joyce before. And I think with Giles too, like comments about like, are you being safe? And when Angel had just finished asking Buffy about Scott, and she interestingly declined to tell him that he broke up with her. Angel then asks if she's being safe, and you can tell that Buffy's jolted and like, what? Like
With
with
Scott?
Scott? And it's like, no. Like patrolling. It's just I was like, I don't think Angel wants to know what you're doing
anything
with
about
Scott.
Scott. Yeah.
But it's just so
Like
funny that
when
that's
he asks
where
her about Scott, he has this, it's so uncomfortable, and he's like, I need to do a polite thing here and ask her about this dude. How is Scott? Like he forces it out.
yeah,
And you feel for both of them in that situation, because she's
so
like,
awkward.
I don't want to talk about this, and
Because
he doesn't want to talk about it, and it's
there's
adorable.
clearly still sexual tension between them. Because I think, why does she say "smell me" and get all up close to him?
He says, how did you get away? And she's like, I
That's
hid
right.
in the prison laundry and went out with the garbage or something like that. And then she's like,
Yeah.
no garbage, smell me. And yeah, that's a moment where they both realize like,
Yeah.
we should not be standing this close to each other.
It's like, there's still some serious sexual tension here.
Yep.
Not good.
Big
And
tension.
I just, I don't know. It makes me so sad.
Yeah. You're supposed to.
I guess that's true. That's the whole point. And I'm trying to think back on other TV shows that I've been really invested in and how much relationships in those shows affected me. And this one, plus her with Spike, I guess that might be spoilery, but I think we've talked about that
I feel like that's so well known.
Yeah.
In the fandom. Like everybody talks about Team Buffy, Team Spike, Team Angel. So
Yeah. But both of those make me actually like feel things.
yeah.
And it's wild. And I don't know how close any other show has really gotten to me, especially one that's not a drama, that's not intended to, like freaking
Yeah.
Grey's Anatomy. They want to pull on your
Oh, and
heartstrings
that show is
and
all about
all that.
romantic relationships. The other one
Yeah.
I can think of that has had a strong effect on me is in The Walking Dead, Maggie and Glenn.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Watching
Yep.
them fall in love and grow together is really beautiful, and I felt very
Mm,
invested in their relationship.
that's a good point. That one almost killed me.
Yeah, it's
Not
pretty
gonna
hard
lie.
because their love is so real,
Ugh.
and
It
they
does feel very lived in and just pure. And both of, God, they're such good actors. Both of them, Lauren Cohan and Stephen Yeun, are just outstanding at portraying like every single emotion that they would be feeling on their face. Like it's
yeah.
just that's not a coincidence then if Angel and Buffy, both of them do an excellent job with the face acting too.
Yeah. It
just
it
pulls
brings it
you right
home.
in.
It really pulls you in, yeah. The emotions
Ugh,
are so on their faces.
damn.
The car
Pain.
accident was not Buffy's fault. That other guy was
No,
not watching where he was going. She shouldn't have to pay for that. That's always
definitely not.
bothered me. I'm always like, that's not her fault.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe she was driving a little recklessly, but that guy was clearly not watching where he was going.
Yeah.
He was eating the
And
candy bar.
definitely under the influence.
Yeah. And then he
Oh,
then he left the scene of the accident, which is like an additional felony.
right? I was just like, "Ooh, that's bad. Very
But,
bad."
all the cops were also on candy, so there was no one to make a
Yeah.
record or anything.
I guess except for that poor old man who maybe just was watching his diet and didn't eat any candy and happened to come across Giles as Ripper.
Yeah.
Just a bad night for him.
Yeah. You mean the
Goodness.
cop that Ripper
Yeah.
beat up? He had
Yeah.
candy in his pocket.
Wait, did he?
Yeah, he had a candy
How
bar in
did
his
I
pocket.
miss that?
I don't
All
know.
these times I've seen that episode, I just didn't process it. Well, then maybe that's why Giles was able to, easily take advantage of him.
Yeah, and
If
also
he reverted back to like a period with no training.
yeah, and also he was trembling. Like Giles rightly
That's
was like,
true.
"You're not going to use that gun," because the way he was holding it was like, "Oh, I have a gun.
Oh,
I
yeah.
guess I pointed at the guy." Like
That's
he
a good
didn't.
point. I can't believe I didn't process that after all these years. But that's true. Like
Yeah.
Giles knew 100% that guy was not going to be able to shoot him.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I mean, he's got a good read on people.
Yeah.
That's for sure. What does he say when he's like kind of moving around in front of him? He's like,
Oh,
what?
ooh,
Copper
Copper's
gonna
got a
shoot me?
gun.
Oh, he is just
And then Joyce
ridiculous.
is like, "Oh, you're so cool."
I was like, no, Joyce.
That's
no.
not cool. That's violent and disturbing.
Yep. I was like, I think even 16 or 17-year-old me would 100% not be turned on by a guy I was interested in assaulting a police officer.
Yeah, that probably would have done it for me too. Like even the breaking into the shop window, I probably
Oh,
would have
yeah.
gone with. But like once he grabs the cop's gun, I would have been like, I need to go to the bathroom
Yep. It's like,
over across
too far.
town. Yeah,
Too far. Oh,
that would have
gosh.
scared me.
It's funny. Well, and I'm assuming the age they're all meant to revert to was about 17, since that's what Buffy and the Scoobies are right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, it made me feel also kind of, I don't know, like when I was 17, I was not perfect, but I was by no means like wild. Like I think I drank a couple of times in high school, but most of the time I was the designated driver for my friends because I was terrified of getting in trouble. And just, I mean, romantically, maybe my parents weren't thrilled with how I was behaving, but overall I was like a pretty calm kid. So the fact that this entire town, all the adults just go nuts,
Well, I
I
think
was
we're
like,
meant to understand that the candy, in addition to making them revert in
yeah,
age, is also making them kind of high, and then
it's
some of them
true.
are drinking on top of that, and
Oh yeah,
and also that it's addictive, right? That's why they're all like screaming at the factory because they're just like, we want more
true.
candy.
When Joyce says to Buffy, like, "Screw you, I want candy," I was like, "Damn, all
Yeah.
right, that's
All right, Joyce.
intense." Yeah, it is definitely affecting them in more ways than just having them revert to their teenage selves.
Yeah.
Because, oof. Let's see. I'm trying to look through my notes and see if there was anything that I
Oh, I have one more
forgot to
thing.
mention. Okay.
My favorite line in the whole episode.
Something's weird.
Something's not.
Love that. That's so cute. It's so Oz too.
Yeah. And
Just spot
it's so
on.
hilarious because he's right. Everything is weird in that moment. He's like, what?
Yeah, it's like, what's not weird? Oh, I have a question. So, if you can remember, because I had a hard time remembering, back to the very first time you saw this episode,
Uh-huh.
when did you start to think or suspect that the candy was having an effect on the adults?
Um, I think in the scene where Joyce and Giles confront Buffy about lying to them, and then they plots down on the sofa and they're sharing a candy bar, I was
Mm,
like, all right, there's something about the
there.
candy, it's doing something to them. And even in that conversation, they were starting to show signs, right? Like Giles was like, "Don't
Yep.
freak out." And
Oh,
and Joyce is just a little
gosh.
more casual than usual. So I
Yeah.
I want to say it was then, but like I don't know. Maybe it wasn't until it was made really obvious.
I honestly think that I only noticed, not even associating it with the candy necessarily, but noticing that something was off. I only realized it when Joyce was like, "Here, take the car."
Oh
I was like,
yeah.
"Hold up." But
Something
now
is weird. Yeah.
rewatching it, even when, Buffy gets home and Giles and Joyce are both there to confront her because she is, used the other as her alibi for going off on her own to see Angel. And she's like, "Do you guys want to watch some TV?" The way that they're behaving, especially Joyce, as she is sitting there eating the chocolate, confronting Buffy, I feel
Yeah.
like you can see the little hints of it, especially once Buffy goes upstairs and Joyce makes that comment, like, "Oh, she drives me crazy." Like, you can
Yeah.
start to see it coming
And they
out.
both sort of like slouch down on the sofa in a way that neither of them would usually be. They're like the
Hmm.
posture is a little looser and
Yes.
their speech is a little more casual than usual.
It's so
It
subtle, but
it's
so
very
well
subtle. Yeah.
done.
It's oh my god, I love this episode so much.
Seriously.
It's just nonstop silliness.
Oh, I love it so much. And it's still, I think it's also just a nice overarching message about one, it's hard. You never really grow all the way up. Like there is
Yeah.
always that part of you, even if you evolve, you mature, you make different choices. It's still, you're the same person that you were when you were 17 in terms of, you know, your core sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think it's just good for Buffy to realize that, she is more mature than sometimes we realize, or that Giles and Joyce want to give her credit for. But after seeing her driving skills and some of the way she behaves, it's like, okay, you're not all the way there yet,
Yeah.
Buffy.
She is still a child. Should we get into some trivia?
Sure.
According to the Sunnydale High yearbook, the chocolate sale earned $600,000 for the band, which is
Damn.
unbelievable and hilarious.
The band is gonna have like the best instruments and uniforms ever. It's glorious. Okay, so I love this one. The accent used by Anthony Head for young Giles is not his own accent. Head's accent, while not as upper class as Giles's, is a much more refined Southern accent. The accent he uses for the younger Giles is a real working class London accent.
Christine Sutherland has often named this as her favorite and most fun to film episode, along with Ted, When She Was Bad, and Innocence.
I could see that.
Yeah,
It
this must have been
definitely makes
delightfully
sense.
fun to act
Right.
in.
And this is the only time where Joyce takes direct action along with the other Scoobies without being taken, targeted, or held hostage by an enemy. That is a fun fact.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about how the demon needs to be fed babies. And I love Joyce's reaction to
the babies
wondering
must
if
be
the
so
babies
scared.
are okay. It's so sweet.
Yeah, she is a sweetheart.
Mhm.
This was the first episode to be written by Jane Espenson, who went on to be the writer of many, many episodes, and I think responsible for some of the best of Buffy.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I love that. I will say a couple of quotes that I also really loved. One, just Giles saying, "You're my slayer," stirred something. It's like, damn it. So attractive. I was like, why is that so attractive? Speaking of possessiveness only being attractive when it's not real.
Yeah.
And Xander, when they figure out the candy is what's causing it, and he's just like, what? He's like, I don't get this. The candy's supposed to make you feel all immature and stuff, but I've had a ton and I don't feel any different. He's like, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
He's like, at least you're self-aware, Xander.
Self-owned.
And Snyder in this whole episode obviously is hysterical. I think he has that one problematic in 2024 line of
how Buffy
summers
drives.
you drive like a spaz. I was like, oh, but when
that doesn't age well.
No, when they've gotten in the wreck and they get out of the car and the guy runs off but takes Snyder's candy first, the indignant way that he goes, that guy took my candy, every single time, it gets to me. So he just this is such a great,
it's a brilliant
Snyder
performance by him. As I've mentioned before, I've been rewatching Charmed, and there was an episode I watched a couple days ago that he is in as a wizard. And I was like, oh, that's a perfect role for him. He's he's got this like dirty, gross, black, furry cloak and a big wizard staff, and he's all creepy. I'm like, yeah,
buddy.
Armin Shimmerman. Okay.
Definitely his best work in Buffy.
It is time for the question that everyone knows the answer to. Does it still slay?
Oh, it slays so hard. So much. This episode is just chef's kiss. It's so light. Yeah, delightful is the perfect description for it. 'Cause I think I smile the entire time I'm watching it for the most part. It's just so enjoyable. It's definitely a good one when you need a pick-me-up, for sure.
I, of course, also think that it slays and that it will continue to slay. I think the parts that the little tiny details that don't hold up to 2024 are insignificant in the larger just joy and playfulness of the episode. It's extremely silly.
Oh man, it's gonna be so hard when we do our season 3 like superlative episode trying to pick a favorite.
Season 3 is so good. And then I was looking at the second half of season 3 to like start planning and scheduling, and I was like, every single one of these episodes is just a superstar episode. There is not a dud in the second half of season 3.
Seriously.
It's pretty amazing.
I can't wait. I wish I didn't have a job so I could just watch Buffy all the time right now.
I know. Sorry about that.
That would be wonderful. It's all good.
There is one small piece of news, and it's not great news. The Wolfpack TV show on Paramount Plus that was supposed to have a second season has been
Aw.
canceled. So there's no second season. And that was Sarah Michelle Gellar as, if people want to watch the first season, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's a werewolf
Yeah.
TV show. And I thought it was uneven in the first season, but that by the end it got pretty good. And so I was looking
Yeah.
forward to season 2. So it's
Well,
a bummer.
that sucks.
I hope she'll land in something else great.
Yeah, because it's nice watching her still. She's still excellent.
Yeah, she really is. She just has not had another show that really hit. She's had a few that, she started and they didn't go more than 1 or 2 seasons. And then she was in that show with Robin Williams that was like popular and critically acclaimed called the Crazy Ones. And then of course he died. So
Ugh,
she
that
just
was
does not
awful.
have any luck after Buffy with TV shows. I mean, she's got a good
No.
movie career, and I think
It's
she has
true.
side businesses as well.
Yeah.
And kids and all that other
Buffy's
stuff.
like lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. And it was the perfect person to play that role at the perfect time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go over to the bronze and see what some of our listeners thought of band candy.
Bronze things. Things of bronze.
Bronze things. Things of bronze. In this episode.
Yeah.
Oh,
why don't you take the first one?
Okay, so Sam says, Ripper Giles in full force. He is hot. It was true then and now for me. He could get it. That's funny. Clearly, we don't disagree, Sam. All of the actors did a truly phenomenal job, especially the ones playing adults who regress back to teens. Joyce was perfection. Her little gestures, bravo. Any ideas where they got their inspiration from? Also, the one and only time I found Snyder not only tolerable, but funny and fun. Truly an incredible hour of TV.
Yeah.
I do wonder where they got their inspiration from. I would assume their own teenage selves, in part.
Or maybe they went to local mall or something and observed teenagers.
It's true, because all of their co-stars playing teenagers were not teenagers.
Yeah, they're all in their 20s.
So that would have been hard.
All right. We also heard from Becky. Hi, Becky. Hey, OMG, this episode is gold. I'd forgotten about this one. I don't know how. So watching it was like seeing it for the first time, and I couldn't stop laughing. Some of the best acting of the series and so many good one-on-one moments, and I loved all the cultural references. Some of my favorite moments, it was hard to scale down to just these. The cold open was great. I always enjoy Buffy and Giles moments. They play off each other so well. Cracked up at the real world reference and it not being real. Loved that show in my younger years. Mm-hmm. Selling things for the band. When I was in band, we used to sell oranges and wrapping paper. My mom worked at the VA hospital and she always got me some good orders. Smiley face emoji. Love the dinner scene with Joyce and Buffy. They too play off each other really well. Both Giles and Joyce buying all of Buffy's candy bars and using it against her was cute. Again, so many good one-on-one scenes in this episode. Ha at Buffy hitting Giles in the head. He was about ready to tell her he was right, but she nailed him. His facial expression was so good. He was about ready to tell her she was right. There we go.
Yeah.
SMG, Sarah Michelle Gellar's frosted bangs. Yike. Yeah, they are frosted within an inch of their life. Sweaty Angel? Yes, please. Excellent one-on-one with Buffy and Angel. They did a decent job showing the intimate connection is still there. I laughed at Sarah Michelle Gellar's face when Angel asked if she was being careful. Busted. I like them using the catching Buffy in a lie to bring Giles and Joyce together. It was very believable. The bronze clip, heart. Badass Giles is the best. Anthony and Christine should have won an Emmy for their performances in this episode. Everything they did and said was spot on. On first watch of this show, I was very invested in the Willow-Xander drama, but for some reason, it's annoying me the second time around, even though it does set up a great future storyline. Much like every scene with Giles and Joyce, Principal Snyder's scenes were also perfect. Every one of them. Fairly sure Joyce gave Giles her gum during one of those steamy kisses. Gross, but yes. The mayor casually making calls while a ritual is about to happen. Again, Grainer nails it. Yeah, that was pretty great. Like, I want to talk to someone about sewer maintenance. LOL at the snake. CGI has come a long way since 1998. Yeah, that's true. That snake looked horrible.
Yeah.
I am shipping Giles and Joyce. They are too cute together. That last bit at the end, totally giving away that they did sleep together, was so funny. Joyce with the handcuffs and cheeky look. Giles' excitement when Buffy punches Ethan. Buffy's erratic driving and Willow's face the whole time. So much goodness. This episode was perfect from start to finish. Funny and suspenseful, and the entire cast was in top form and delivered excellent performances. 100% still slays. Favorite quotes. Oz when talking about Willow. She's always cute. Made me swoon a little. Cordy, are we killing something again? Buffy, just my carefree spirit. When Buffy realized it's her mom and Giles outside making out, Buffy, Mom! Giles, go away, we're busy.
That was great.
Miss Barton when she sees Willow at the Bronze. Willow, that's a tree. Like you said, she sounds like she's wicked high. Everything Principal Snyder said. And have a great week. Grr, arg. Thanks, Becky. Another fantastic feedback from Becky. And we got voicemail from our friend Anwen in New Zealand.
Yay!
Hey, still slaying. It's Anwen here. So sorry that I couldn't come and guest this week because there is just so much life happening at the moment, but I'll be back another time. I did just want to pass on my thoughts though. So it was great to hear last week's episode and lovely to hear Mark guesting. Penny, you discussing Twilight was fantastic. Really good timing for me. I'm just finished watching all of the movies with my 10-year-old daughter. And the reason I wanted to do that is that she kind of asked, and I thought, let's hate watch it together so that you don't end up watching it with your friends and thinking it's romantic. So after watching it and kind of laughing most of the way through, I said to my daughter, what do you do if a boy says to you that you're his own personal brand of heroine, he's addicted to you, but he'll only hurt you and be bad for you because he's so bad, and then breaks into your room at night to watch you sleep? And she said, run. And I thought, yes, I have raised a strong daughter.
Excellent.
Good parenting.
I agree. The music, the cinematography is beautiful, but the writing and the plot is just so terrible. It is an amazing cast, and I think it's real sad that Kristen and Robert, they're actually really good actors if you see them in almost anything else, but this is just dreadful. So cool with all the different scenes, all the different actors. In one scene, there's Tissaia from Witcher, Vecna from Stranger Things, Thranduil from The Hobbit, Shannon from Lost, Aziraphale from Good Omens, and then you've got Dakota Fanning and even Rami Malek who played Freddie Mercury. So it's pretty cool for star spotting.
That's true.
And for eye candy, you can't beat those
the cast is
shirtless
amazing.
boys. Anyway, from eye candy on to band candy. Remember The Real World? It was such a flashback when they brought that show up. For those people who don't remember, it was one of the first reality TV shows. It spawned so many, and it felt really voyeuristic at the time, but now it's pretty tame since everyone streams their whole lives on social media. It was really cool to hear that little flashback. I love the transitions and the one-liners in this episode. It's so funny. When Buffy says, does he ever say he's sorry? And then the next scene, ow, sorry. I loved Xander and Willow's little footsies under the table. Her cute little orange sneakers and his unlaced shoes kind of sums up their personalities. One of the best things in this episode is just Giles and Joyce. They are the best. I just love the Ripper accent and how cute they are together. And she says, oh, you've got such a great record collection. He goes, yeah, it's all right. It's so funny. It's such teenagers. It's even funnier watching it now that I'm their age. All the old fogies at the Bronze. I remember watching it last time being like, oh, look at all those grown-ups at the Bronze. And yeah, pretty much most of them are younger than me now. So that was pretty cool watching the second time around. Maybe there's a reunion in town or a Billy Joel tour, says Willow. Who would have thought that 25 years later that's still relevant because he's still touring and that's still pretty much his demographic.
It's true.
I love the small moments that you see visually, like the two Volvos dragging off at the lights and the mailman sitting there on the roundabout reading the mail. Giles' glee when Buffy is beating up Ethan is just gold. And my favourite from the whole episode is just anything with Snyder in it. He was so fun to watch. Hey, I'm really stoked. Hey, guys, wait up. And then when he's trying to get it on with Joyce and she just rolls her eyes and moves away, was classic. And his best line, I think, in the whole series is, I took Taekwondo at the Y. It's fantastic. And the episode ended with a very, very bad digital serpent, but we'll forgive that for all of the rest of the goodness that we saw. Fantastic episode. Loved it so much. Keep up the great work, guys. Bye.
Bye, Anwen. Thank you so much for calling in. I should clarify that Anwen pronounces her name Anwen, and I constantly pronounce it Anwen, and I've apologized to her about it. And she said, oh, that's actually the correct pronunciation, so don't apologize. But I have been trying to switch to Anwen. It's really hard. I don't know why.
I can't make myself say Anwen either.
Yeah.
It's just so hard. Maybe it's also part of the New Zealand accent getting into my brain. Like, Anwen doesn't sound as...
But when she says it, it sounds beautiful.
That's true. Everything she says sounds beautiful.
Yeah, her accent is delightful. I overuse that word, but it's true.
It's a good word.
All right, that is the end of the main section of the podcast.
Stay tuned for the Watcher's Diaries if you want to hear the spoilery discussion.
And if you would like to join the conversation, and we hope that you do, you can find all of our contact information at podcastica.com, or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/podcastica, or we have another Facebook page that is called Still Slaying, a Buffyverse podcast. You can find that there. We're also on Instagram at StillSlayingCast. You know what? All this information is going to be in the show notes. Don't try to remember it from just listening to me. And you can send an email or record a voice message to stillslayingfeedback@gmail.com.
Also at podcastica.com, you'll find this information and links to our social media pages and all of our other shows.
And there are many.
Yes.
Mentioned earlier, I'm also podcasting on the Marvel show Echo, and that show is another badass woman kicking butt with some supernatural elements. It's a different kind of show for Marvel. It's a little more adult than most of the other Marvel shows, and it's really good. I've been having a good time working on that. And then Welcome to the Apocalypse. If you're not subscribed to Welcome to the Apocalypse, you are missing out because it is so funny.
It's so much fun. I've been playing catch up on Run for is it Run? Oh no.
Run for Your Lives?
Yeah. I was like somebody's lives. It's Run for Your Lives. So I have been catching up on the Run for Your Lives podcast, which is with Paige and Daphne. And if you like any sort of disaster movies, whether it's natural disaster, sci-fi disaster, just anything, they've probably covered it, and they do an excellent job. Most recently, they did Dr. Sleep, and I love Dr. Sleep, and they had excellent coverage of it. They've also covered, I think almost all the Purge movies at this point, and then the kind of classic natural disaster movies like Dante's Peak and Volcano. So it's a fun one to go back and listen to.
They're particular fans of the Jurassic Park franchise and the Tremors franchise. Those are probably their best known episodes. Paige and Daphne have a really nice chemistry, so listening to them is really pleasant. It's just it's like a conversation at the pub with your friends. It's lovely.
I agree.
And if you like what we're doing here, hit like, hit follow, subscribe, all the buttons depending on which podcast app you're on, and throw us a rating or a review. We really appreciate those.
Yes, please. And next time, be sure to tune in when we cover Season 3, Episode 7, Revelations. Thanks, everyone, and...
Kiss rocks? Why would anyone want to kiss...
Oh, wait, I get it.
All right, that's the end of the non-spoiler section. If you want to avoid spoilers, you should stop listening now. Okay, that was your warning. Now we're going to have spoilers. Woohoo! Spoilers! Watcher's Diaries!
It's too bad we can't sneak a look at the Watcher Diaries. I'm sure it's full of fun facts to know and tell.
Yeah, that's too bad. That stuff is private.
Also, Joyles keeps them in his office, in his personal files.
Most importantly, it would be wrong.
Where should we go?
I
Let's
mean,
start with the fact that Buffy does eventually find out about Joyce and Giles having sex on the hood of a
oh
police
yeah.
car, and it's hilarious.
So funny.
In an otherwise
And
heavy episode, it provides a great deal of comic relief.
yes, it's so funny. Poor Buffy. Like, that image is never going to leave her head. But I will say, too, I am so happy that we get this nice, light, funny episode before the next one, because
Yeah.
the next one makes me so ragey every single time that I watch it. So it's good to have, a little bit of a break. And I also love how Buffy ends up like practically acing her SATs.
Yeah,
I remember
that's pretty
being
great.
surprised by that in, watching it, but I kind of like that they did that because it gives her this even bigger struggle in, the choice that she needs to make and what she prioritizes going forward. But that's a fun
Yeah,
one.
it is. I also
Um,
like that, you know, Buffy is the Slayer and Willow is the smart one, right? And then
mhm.
she does really well on the SATs, and you could tell it's like a weird identity moment for her where she's like, but I'm not the smart one. Willow's the smart
Yeah.
one. And then she has to sort of understand that they can both be smart. And
They can have
then
layers.
that comes around again in, I think, early season 5 when Buffy really throws herself into college, and
Yeah.
or in season 4, and Willow is like, Buffy, you made me academically jealous of you.
Yeah.
And it's just this great moment where they're both so happy for Buffy that she's like proved that she actually can do school stuff. She's just been too distracted in the past to really dedicate herself to school, and it's so cute.
It is so
I love
cute.
that moment.
I love their friendship.
Yeah.
It's just
Um,
precious.
when you alluded to this earlier, but when Joyce passes away,
Ugh.
Giles is grieving after the funeral is to listen to that Cream record again, and if
It's so sad.
it's really sad because even though the two of them never get together again,
Mhm.
they have a connection, and he truly cared about Joyce. And I have a feeling that that day, as crazy as it was really special to him. That,
Mhm.
he didn't ever pursue Joyce again. She sort of made it clear she wouldn't be interested in that, but
Yeah.
his sadness was palpable and
It just hurts my heart. Because, of
beautiful.
course, he can't really talk about that with Buffy
Right.
or any of the other, Scoobies or characters that we see on a regular basis. And it just makes me so sad thinking about how he had to kind of internalize that and process it on his own.
Yeah.
And recognizing that Buffy's grief at losing her mother might take priority in that moment, but he clearly felt something for her.
Yeah.
And that just it gets
I
me every time.
I learned this really helpful framework when you're dealing with a traumatic event or an adverse event that affects multiple people, and how you should behave. And you should think about the event at the center of a series of concentric circles. And who is the most affected by the event goes in the closest circle. So that would be Buffy and Dawn
Yeah.
at that point. And then, wherever you are in the circle, you should support inward and vent outward. Never vent to the person who's more impacted
Oof.
than you,
Yeah.
and support that person, and let that person vent to you, and then you in turn vent outward.
I like that
It's a
idea.
helpful
That
way to
makes sense.
visualize how to be a good friend in situations that are really complicated. Now,
Yeah.
Giles doesn't have anyone outward to vent to that we
Mm.
see.
Yeah.
Eventually he has Olivia, but I don't think he ever talks to her about this. And
Yeah.
he needed someone. Maybe he has like friends that he called in England or something. Who knows? But
I
what we
hope
see is
so.
him alone, and it is really sad.
We know none of them go to therapy.
Yeah.
They could all use it, but That's not a priority.
No.
I also just, so it's kind of a small thing, but seeing the way Snyder behaves and Snyder kind of having a little bit of a crush on Joyce and kind of flirting with her, just kind of reminds me of back in Becoming Part 2, where she's trying to insult him, and Buffy's like, "You never got a single date in high school, did you?"
Yeah.
And I feel kind of bad for him after watching this episode. Not too bad, but kind of bad. And so it makes it just a little sadder. It's like an end of an era when the mayor transforms into a giant snake and snaps
eats him.
him right up. She's like, "Oh, Snyder."
Yeah,
sorry.
you didn't have a very good life, did you?
No.
Yeah, I mean,
terrible
there
way
is
to
a part of
go.
me that feels compassion for the awkward, friendless kid in high school, but
Mhm.
too many times my "I will be nice and friendly to you" turned into "please stop stalking me."
Yes. I
So
had a dream about, I think it's because I watched this episode, I had a dream about someone I had an experience like that with last night. And I woke up just being like, oh, ooh.
yeah, and they're like, "But you were nice to me." And it's like, "Yeah, nice, not
Yes,
like sexually aggressive. Please back
right.
off."
Yes, I was
Uh,
not trying to secretly tell you that I was in love with you and wanted to sleep with you.
I was just being friendly and polite. And Snyder
Man.
strikes me as the kind of person who would push that until you had to be mean to him.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you'd be like, "I said no."
Oh, and this is another, I love, we talked about how many times there are little references and bits of comedic relief here and there after Giles and Joyce hooked up. Because in Gingerbread, coming soon, he says something to her about like asking if she'd heard the rumor about them, or have you heard, this thing that's going around about us, and it kind of flusters her. So I love that it's like spread throughout
Yeah.
their little
They don't
community.
the show doesn't do the thing of like something that happened in a prior episode is gone forever, and like they constantly do this where they reference
Mhm.
things from the past and bring them forward into other plot lines and have them affect people's actual development and growth. It's
Yes,
just
it's
at the
excellent.
time that was groundbreaking television, and now we take it for granted that series TV is going to be like that, but it didn't used
Mhm.
it used to be very,
Mm,
there'd be like one sort of loose overarching plot and everything else would be sort of disposable.
that's true. Oh shoot, I probably should have talked about this during the regular part of the episode, but ever since Beauty and the Beast and seeing the differences in the titles, I've been
Mhm.
going back and looking up different titles in different languages in different countries, and this one was fascinating.
Oh,
Like
cool.
for, and obviously you have to take into account like directly translating might not get the message across all the time, but in Finnish it technically was translated into stomach full of sweet. In French it was chocolate effect, and the Germans, just keeping it real, it was called going wild. So I was like, that's appropriate. That sounds about right. It made me happy. And then Spanish just spoils it right away with the bewitched chocolates.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I was like, yeah, cool. All
All
right.
right.
I love it.
That's very direct. Thank you, Spain. Buffy is one of the few shows that I've watched in other countries.
That's
When
cool.
I'm on vacation in other countries or traveling for whatever reason, I like to watch a little bit of local TV just to get the flavor of it. And
Yeah.
I've watched Buffy in French, in Spanish, and with subtitles in Arabic, but the show was still in English.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Um, it's fun. It's fun. I don't speak French, so the French one was just right over my head. But
Mm-hmm.
I remembered the story and I knew what was happening, but I didn't understand the language. But the Spanish one, I was like, wait, this is working. I'm starting to like
Yeah.
remember my Spanish. This is good.
Maybe I should try that, because they always, you hear from people that move to a country and one of the big ways that they pick up on the language is by watching TV. So maybe I should try that with Buffy, because I took like 8 years of Spanish and not enough of it has stuck around.
Yeah.
I might try to seek out Buffy in Spanish. That sounds fun.
I'm sure it's on YouTube or something.
Oh, you're probably right. It's a good idea. There'll be some brain engagement for me at some point.
All right, I think we've thoroughly covered this. So that is the complete end of our show. Thank you everyone for listening, and until next time, I'm Penny.
And I'm Kara.
Keep
Keep slaying.